out of a busy day to join for the forum. My name is Jane Harmon, and I am the coordinator of the Alliance of In-Town Neighbors, a group of neighborhood leaders who meet once a month, 6 times a year, with a guest speaker from the city, the state, or an organization to explore what is impacting the city of Atlanta and our neighborhoods in particular. It is a civilized discussion in a home with wine served, and because of this, the Alliance is respected throughout the city, and guests are willing to participate. Kasim Reed, Andre Dickens, and Felicia Moore can attest to that from firsthand experience. Our moderator this evening is Tom Baxter, a well-known and respected reporter for the Supporter Report. I know we have a great many questions to cover, so I will turn the forum over to him.
Thank you. And just real quickly, I'd like to introduce the candidates as I see them on my screen, so that on the second row we have from left to right, City Council President Felicia Moore, former Mayor Kasim Reed, Attorney Sharon Gay, and then on the next row, Councilman Antonio Brown and Andre Dickens. And we're going to go in alphabetical order in our first round of questions tonight, and this question is for each one of you. Too much of a good thing sometimes really is too much. Loud, late night music, frequent road or lane closures, and the overuse of public spaces puts a strain on our quality of life. What can you do to alleviate the stress put on Piedmont Park, the historic Fourth Ward Park, and other city parks and their adjacent neighborhoods and schools by large outdoor festivals and the overall number of festivals and 5K runs that the city permits? Councilman Brown.
Thank you so much for that question. So, and I apologize, Tom, just for a point of clarity. Are you asking what we plan to do as mayor to limit that activity, or I'm just trying to understand the question?
Yes, I think what the gist of the question is that everybody loves festivals and everybody loves 5K runs. In the part of town where we live, they're an almost constant thing, and they can be an annoyance at times. How do you balance that, and what are you going to do to have fun and yet make our neighborhoods livable?
No, I think that's a great question. One of the things that I will point out and say is that there's already a process within the city of Atlanta where anyone that is coming into a community to have a festival or an event, that they have to go through a process of notifying the city of Atlanta and the elected official over the particular area about the event that's coming into their communities. So I think that what's important is that as mayor, I would never impede on another council member or the community's decision to allow an event to come into an area. But what I think could help mitigate the sound and the noise and disturbance is really focusing on community policing in these areas, where we can have community officers out during these events to ensure that the events remain safe and that they are able to control any kind of noise nuisance, and that the organizers have safeguards in place so that it doesn't spill over into the communities. I see a lot of times these type of events spill over into the communities, whether it's parking, whether it's a noise disturbance. And I think working in collaboration with the community policing unit and putting safeguards in place to keep the disturbance from spilling over will help mitigate these problems for neighborhoods across Atlanta.
Thanks. Councilman Dickens.
That Councilmember Brown and I are coming from another forum, so that's why I'm in the car. I don't want any participants, attendees thinking that we're out of order. I'm arriving to my home. But a couple of things as it relates to that. One is that we must enforce the laws that we currently have on the books as it relates to noise ordinances. So part of doing a new thing is just do the old thing better. And that's an enforcement thing. So we have to make sure with the noise ordinances, as festivals and events get out of hand with noise, that we go ahead on and enforce that right away, regardless of how politically connected the event festival owner is. That operator must comply, particularly as it relates to Piedmont Park, right adjacent to a Midtown High School. Secondly, so that's enforcing what's already on the books. That means the solicitor, the mayor, and the city attorney being tenacious and muscular in their approach to those offenses. Secondly, one of the things that we have done is we have a larger park now that can relieve some pressure from Piedmont Park, and that's with the West Side Reservoir Park that actually will take on a lot of Class A events, and we'll make sure that we keep disturbances down there, but we'll be able to do a lot more at that facility than we can by spreading it out from just Piedmont and Old Fourth Ward. The third thing is, I think we need to go ahead on and look at the calendar at the very beginning of the year. When I become mayor, we'll have an events calendar for all communities, but your community in particular, because you do have a lot of races and a lot of festivals, and to talk about it in advance, best practices, issues that we did not correct from the previous time, and go ahead on and get it out on the table with the MPU and the neighborhood association leadership to go over what makes for a better event and a better experience for the community residences. And I think that being upfront about it before new festivals and races are even introduced, the ones that we know are annual, we can talk about what works and what doesn't work and how we can amend them to make them better. Thank you.
Sharon Gay.
Yes, first of all, good evening, everyone. I come to you from my in-town neighborhood. 40 of my 42 years in Atlanta have been spent living in town, first in Virginia-Highland, then in Ansley Park, and now in Inman Park. So I've been in and around a lot of these festivals and events that you're talking about, have been for years. And I sort of come at this from two directions. On the one hand, in Inman Park, our revered festival is the primary way we raise money for the neighborhood, but it's put on by the neighborhood. And so I think we have a higher degree of sensitivity to the impact on the neighborhood. I've also been on the board of the Fourth Ward Park Conservancy, helped found that, and currently on the Piedmont Park Conservancy. So I'm also very aware of the painful impact on the parks of this kind of access. And I think there are several things we need to do. First, I agree with Councilmember Dickens. We need to make sure we're enforcing the code that we already have. There's a lot of sort of give and take, and different events are maybe treated differently. And we need to make sure that we're even-handed in our application and interpretation of the festivals ordinance. Two, I do think that we need to take a fresh look at the actual festivals ordinance and the noise ordinance. I think there's some ambiguities, and I've seen this both from working as a neighborhood person and as a lawyer, that there's some confusion and complexity and ambiguity in those ordinances that I think could be cleaned up, that would make it easier to get a handle on some of the problems, the problems around the edges that a lot of the neighborhoods are concerned about. And I would be very interested in setting sort of a budget for an annual budget for each park. And you've got to do some data around this to make sure that it's legally sound, but do an analysis for each park, including new parks, as has been mentioned. Things may go to the West Side Park, but really look at setting a realistic impact budget annually for each park and make sure that we manage the overall impact, collective impact of events around the park and on the neighborhoods.
Felicia Moore.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you all for the opportunity to share with you. So I will say, the festivals, the races, all of these activities are what make Atlanta great. And we certainly want to keep those going, but we also have to balance it against the quality of life and the impact that it has on our neighborhoods. So one of the things I think we need to do is have some real discussions about what are those impacts and what we can do as a city to help alleviate those impacts and spread it out. There may be a limit that we need to have in terms of the number of events that we have in a particular park. and looking at how they're spread out throughout the year. And then again, with new parks coming online that are large, that can handle this capacity, making sure we also spread it out to other parts of the city. Even perhaps some of the races, they're just places that people feel are the most popular places, and that happens to be in town where people want to have these events, but we may need to encourage them to have them otherwise. And then looking at our code and making sure that we are following the rules with the code. I know parking is a big issue. What happens after the events when people are traversing through your neighborhood and leaving trash, how they're noisy, either coming from the park or when they're going in the community, we may need an extra layer of security, not only in the park or in the activity, but also on some of the outlying streets to make sure that people are being respectful of people in the neighborhood. So I think it's a conversation where we need to understand what impact people are having, be very clear about that, and then develop a plan with the community, with the event organizers, on how we're going to address it and mitigate it. But most importantly, seeing if we can limit the number and then maybe spread them out to other locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Kasim Reed?
Do is look at our 3-year trends to actually vet the data and look to see if park assets are being overly utilized. And if we find that that is the case, or that there's been a real spike or overuse that's unfair to neighborhoods, we should reduce that. And I think a 3-year trend is a good trend to look at. I also think that as a result of the 3-year analysis that can be done very quickly, we should make the decision as a city to take pressure off of the neighborhoods and to disperse them to the assets that my administration helped to create, the Rodney Cook Park being one of them, and of course the West Side Park that we played a vital role in expanding, along with the other green space expansion we've had through the city. So I think it should be a data-driven decision, and I would lead that conversation. I also would talk to the neighborhoods to find out what specific actions are most damaging and offensive to the community. And then we would set firm standards to avoid that, with consequences for anyone that violated it. Third and finally, we would stringently enforce our noise ordinance and noise standards in our community. And when someone is hosting an important event in a neighborhood, in a community in the city of Atlanta, they should have the tools necessary to monitor noise related to that specific event. If we moved aggressively along those 3 fronts, we could make hosting festivals in our community far better for the people that call Atlanta and those neighborhoods home every single day.
Thank you. Sharon Gay, I'm going to start with you on this round of questions, and this is one that has generated a lot of yard signs in various neighborhoods in our area, at least from what I've seen. Councilman Amir Faroqi has introduced legislation to increase attached and detached accessory dwelling units. It's ADU, and it's sometimes referred to as a grandmother suite. Eliminate parking minimums for residential properties and rezone the area around MARTA stations to permit more housing. Do you support these proposals?
Let me start by saying, I think probably everybody on this call knows this actually started with a much broader plan that the planning department put out to basically change the CDP and change the zoning code for most of the R zoning classifications. And fortunately, that has now been narrowed down, but I still think we have a challenge in the way this is being approached. And with all due respect to my council member, I have 2 concerns about it. One, it's being proposed citywide and for every single neighborhood and every single MPU, and that's not the way we make decisions in Atlanta about zoning. And 2, it's being promoted as a way to increase affordability, and I'm not sure that it's going to get us there. step one is we need to do what's being done. I think the vote in my neighborhood may be happening tonight. Is every neighborhood and every MPU ought to have input on this to look at the impact on their particular neighborhoods and MPUs. And if there are neighborhoods that are receptive to trying this, then adopt it for those neighborhoods, and then let's track it to see if it really does increase the housing supply and increase affordability. But the idea that not all of our MARTA stations are the same. Some of them are in very dense areas. Some of them are basically in residential neighborhoods. And so while in general, I support the idea of increasing density to support transit and to support affordability, it doesn't by in itself lead to affordability. So I don't think the current proposals, unless a given neighborhood or MPU supports them, are the right way to go about increasing the types of housing we have, as well as creating a tool that will in fact lead to greater affordability. My neighborhood is R5. There's a little apartment building across the street from me, carriage house next door. So it's not as though they're always not in keeping with the character of the neighborhoods, but they really need to make these kinds of decisions on a neighborhood basis.
Kasim Reed.
Faruqi should not be leading the conversation on this issue, nor should the Department of Planning. This should be driven by the newly elected mayor of Atlanta after hearing from citizens. By December 1st, we're going to know who the new leader of the city of Atlanta should be. I am against changes to R1. I think we already have capacity around R4 and R5 zoning. And I think that we have more than 800 acres in the city of Atlanta. We already have multiple MARTA stops. So if the interest is moving quickly on density and providing folks access to transit, we have enough assets to get going right away without having this conversation, which I think has been very destructive at a time when we need the city of Atlanta to come together. So I am in favor of a complete pause on this item. I don't believe the path pursued by Mr. Faruqi or Tim Keene and the Department of Planning should continue. I believe that everyone should wait until this election is over. We should have a big conversation and then make decisions that are consistent with the feedback that I've been hearing from all over the city of Atlanta. R1 should be left alone right now. And if you own a home, you should not wake up and look across the street to see someone adding additions to their house without you having a right to have some say-so or involvement. And if there is a matter around density that folks think should be supported, then either the NPU or the district council person or the mayor should make the argument around moving that project forward and go get 8 votes to do so.
Councilman Dickens, what's your opinion of the proposal?
Yeah, I think since June, I've been on the record as saying that I definitely want to increase the ability to house people in the city of Atlanta, but we don't have to do that in this way right now. This is a conversation for later, and not just because we're kicking the can down the road during an election season. We need to deal with this in a robust way and actually address the problem that we're really trying to address, which is housing affordability and density around areas where we have capacity. I've been recorded in various publications as saying the first place that we should look for new housing, which will give us the most bang for our buck, that we can get the most opportunity for more people of all income levels, is on our Atlanta Housing Authority properties. We have 800 acres that haven't been built on since Shirley Franklin was mayor, besides a little bit that was done at Herndon, which was for seniors. So we have so much land that we can do thousands of units of housing, including affordable mixed income housing. And then also around our MARTA stations, there's lots of parking lots that could be parking decks with housing on top of it. And then we have these corridors that we could deal with. But within the neighborhood, right now, I do not support having a conversation across the whole city, carte blanche, about adding additional density within people's backyards. I agree. I actually like accessory dwelling units where they fit and where they are welcomed. And I think that this conversation has been tabled, actually. The council has already, held the legislation, and I don't see a pathway forward during this year. And I think it'll be taken up with the new administration as we go forward in January. So I concur with my fellow candidates that have already spoken that now is not the time to do this, and we have other options to achieve what we truly want to achieve, which is mixed income housing across our city, and we have a way to do that without disturbing the single family designated neighborhoods.
Councilman Brown, what's your opinion of this?
Well, the reality is we need density in the city of Atlanta because the current city's tax base is not sustaining the needs of the city. We have crumbling infrastructure all and out throughout Atlanta that we can't even address because we don't have the financial capacity to do so. Now, I agree that I believe we should not be rushing through this process and pushing legislation through before we have a new mayor that can truly look into the fundamentals behind this rezoning through Commissioner King's office. But I don't want to get away from the fact that we need density. I think we should be refocusing our efforts around transit-oriented development, where we can start building around our MARTA stations and creating opportunity for residents to access our public transportation system. But just to blanketly put out these zoning policies when we don't even have the infrastructure to support it, I think is very reactive. And I think it will not be, in my opinion, something that could be successfully administered the way that it's currently being handled. So that's my position on it. I would not support the legislation. And I believe that the legislation needs to be held until the next mayor is in office.
Thank you. And lastly, Council President Moore.
Well, I believe in the protection of single-family neighborhoods. I started out as a neighborhood president, chair of an NPU, and active member of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. And I know for years we have fought to preserve neighborhoods. My position is I'm 100% opposed to the legislation that is before the city council. And if people are opposed to it, they should vote it down, because if it makes it to my desk as mayor, it will be my first veto that I will issue. This needs to be a bottom-up approach, and so that the communities do what we have done for years and decades in the NPU system, is decide and have discussions about the comprehensive development plan and how we want that shaped, and have opinions about how we want the zoning shaped. I said I was opposed to this when it was a broader discussion back in March, when they were talking about eliminating all single-family zoning and allowing people by right to subdivide property and to build accessory dwellings. Not against accessory dwellings, not against density, but I am against this process and the way that they're doing it, and I am not in favor at all of any of these proposals that are before us. They have a lot of unintended consequences that we have not discussed. Even when we're talking about density, we are not discussing infrastructure above and below ground. Do we have capacity? We're not talking about parking capacity. We're not talking about the roads and the conditions of our roads and that capacity. We're not talking about how much tree cover we will lose. If we build a house behind my house, we're going to lose 10 trees. And then we're not talking about how this can also hasten gentrification in some of our more vulnerable communities where the land value is low. And people and these speculators are already preying upon our people. They're going to swoop in and try to buy up a lot of these communities and subdivide them so they can maximize their money. So there are a lot of unintended consequences we're not talking about. I'm 100% opposed. And if the council can't vote and it comes to me, it's getting vetoed.
Thank you. Councilman Dickens, we're going to start with you in this next round of questions. There's been a sharp contrast between the way repairs were finished in record time after the 2017 I-85 bridge collapse And the bridge fire this year on Cheshire Bridge, which we're told parts of Cheshire Bridge may be closed for a year. And to add insult to injury for all of the businesses that are affected by this, you now have major road work going on Piedmont Road, so that a business like the Colonnade restaurant, which has been selling fried chicken out there for years, there's no access to it from one side and just a very limited access from the other. I know that, you know, a lot of these questions involve the Department of Transportation and out of the city's hands, but what can you do to speed up the process? And why in the world are we in a situation where a major street, business street, is effectively closed and the only access to it is blocked off by more construction?
Yeah, so fair question. One of the first things we have to do is try to prevent these things from happening in the first place. To be able to have a fire on Cheshire Bridge that was due to a gas line that got that's running alongside this bridge that allowed temperatures up to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an issue that we have to try to deal with on a go-forward basis as we talk about our infrastructure and making changes. This bridge burned and they could not have access to start working on it or even to assess it. In like the first 3 or 4 days, it was that hot, people couldn't get around it. So I wanted to make sure I made that point clear. As an engineer, I'm looking at how we did things, you know, decades ago and how we should be doing things on a go-forward basis, so that if an incident occurs, you have some mitigation ability before you get to this catastrophic failure, which we have right now. But to specifically answer your question as it relates to how to improve delivery of projects, one, the 85 bridge that burned was a GDOT project. Georgia Department of Transportation, and huge amount of investment came down, and there was incentives to be able to complete that on time and quickly. And so this is why I wanted to create the Atlanta Department of Transportation to work hand in hand with GDOT. And I think that what we have found is that the city of Atlanta does not have the bridge repair capacity that the Georgia Department of Transportation has. So when I created the Atlanta Department of Transportation, it was because I knew that we did not have the capacity to do some of these efforts, because we were all scattered in various Department of Public Works, Renew Atlanta, City Planning. All of those people were dealing with roads and bridges, but none of them had true capacity. So what we have to do now is utilize our expertise that comes from GDOT to assist us in these efforts, form an alliance, an agreement that if we ever have an issue with our bridges, that we farm it out to them, and hopefully, not just hopefully, but forcefully, we will make sure that we have the relationship that ensures that we get these done at a faster time. Unfortunately, right now with worker shortages and other things, this project is going to take a while.
Thank you. Felicia Moore.
So when the 85 bridge collapsed, there was a sense of urgency. We knew that it was a major collector. We knew that that was the way that many people got to work. And if we didn't get that back on, the economy was going to suffer. Traffic was going to suffer. People were going to suffer. So we're finding ourselves with this particular bridge with the same situation. I believe that if we don't already have the capacity, which I believe it may be a legislative fix, if we are able to identify the funds to get this done, that we need to push it up as an emergency repair and do the procurement as we would normally do, making sure that we get a good price. The thing that they also did in 85 Bridge is they knew that it was going to cost more money, so they incentivized the contractor to get it done in a speedy time. And if they were able to get it on time, they were able to get an incentive pay for having done that. And if they weren't able to, they were going to get a penalty. But of course, they moved heaven and earth to make sure that they made or met the deadline or got before it. So if we have determined that in this city that it has an economic impact as well as an impact to the surrounding communities, and it has a sense of urgency, and we need to approach it with a sense of urgency that may cost us more money as the 85 bridge repair cost more money at the long run, but it did get the bridge fixed. And so that's how I think we should approach this, is with a sense of urgency that gets the job done, respects our procurement process, but also works within the means that we have at the city to accomplish this capital cost.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you so much for the question. You know, I think that as a city, we have to begin being more proactive in how we address these issues that we see happening within Atlanta. I think that we can't wait for something bad to happen and then we respond to it in a reactive way. We should have an emergency repair fund in place that works in partnership with GDOT to ensure that there's already a funding mechanism that at least can get the work started. I also believe the relationship with GDOT has not been a great one. We've fallen short on the partnership, and in doing so, there's a lack of trust around projects. So folks move slow on projects. And, you know, the city doesn't have the best reputation of paying our bills now. And I think that has a lot to do with it, especially when you begin to talk about the reimbursements and working in collaboration with the state. The city's infrastructure is crumbling right now. And part of the reason why it's crumbling is because we have failed to properly maintain our roads and our streets and our bridges. We failed to properly ensure that the infrastructure is supported internally so that we don't have bridges collapsing, so we don't have roads collapsing on themselves. And I think if we did a better job of ensuring that the infrastructure funding was in place in the city of Atlanta, we could also prevent this, which is why I moved forward a $250 million workforce development bond study that focused specifically around infrastructure issues. And I think if we can begin to be preventative and proactive, we won't find ourselves in these situations, and we could proactively begin to address these issues.
Thank you. Sharon Gay.
My grandmother loved the colonnade. So when you mentioned it, I've been thinking about her ever since. We went there many times. This is outrageous. I mean, we have to do better this. We are a big city. We're not some little burg. We need to be able to do things like this faster and better. Yes, it's a travesty that it happened. Yes, we ought to take better care of our infrastructure. We ought to have a comprehensive plan in place for how we regularly inspect our infrastructure, and we have funding in place to regularly repair so that we don't get to this problem. But once we do, we need to rush to take advantage of all the tools that we have available. And somebody who's been involved in transportation and construction for years, I know that there are tools available. First thing I do is call GDOT and see if they would take it over as under a local government project agreement, because they just have capacity that the city doesn't have, because this is what they do all day long. And the city could fund it, or they could fund it jointly, but they could execute a lot more quickly. They can execute contracts more quickly. They can procure more quickly. They have a wide range of contractors available. You could also take advantage of some others, as some others have said, of incentive programs. It's a very common thing in highway construction to have incentives to complete the project sooner. But I'd do that right away and then be able to give the citizens a better handle on what's going to happen and when. I think also there are probably better ways that this could be designed, just the ingress and egress for this project and the Piedmont project you've mentioned, so that they don't conflict. One of the challenges that we have around a lot of our in-town development is each project is permitted in isolation. And so the fact that a sidewalk is closed here and then it's closed on the other side 2 blocks away, nobody thinks about. So any of our projects, whether it's private construction or public infrastructure, we need to manage more carefully for how it's affecting a corridor and an area, and not just permit on a property by property basis. But this is the kind of thing that a mayor could make a difference. You raise, your hair needs to be on fire about it, and absolutely get on the phone and call the governor, call GDOT, call whomever it takes to execute more quickly, and make your team plan for a better access plan in the meantime. So we get back to the colonnade.
Thanks. Kasim Reed, I'm going to begin with you in this next round.
I think I get to answer it, right?
Oh, did you not get? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
The we that you referenced in the cooperative relationship repairing the I-85 fire incident was my administration. So we worked cooperatively with Governor Nathan Deal, GDOT, and the president's administration to get that road repaired right away. The key is having strong relationships at the state level and at GDOT. It's run by a gentleman named Russell McMurray, who's done an exemplary job leading the organization. The Cheshire Bridge challenge that you're having, I believe, stems from poor relationships between the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. They're literally the worst that I've seen them in my lifetime. So I think one, having a functioning relationship with GDOT, understanding how they move projects, and putting a strike team in place to repair the bridge right away is how we're going to get back to normalcy and get the bridge open. The other part of being mayor of Atlanta is understanding that the governor's office and the leadership of the state is about 355 steps away. And it's the mayor's job to make sure that those relationships are cultivated and well maintained, so that when you have challenges like we're having at Cheshire Bridge, we can get GDOT to move in partnership with the city of Atlanta right away. That was my approach in 8 years in working with Governor Nathan Deal and Governor Sonny Perdue. And as a result, we delivered concrete results, not just at the I-85 bridge repair, but on projects like the deepening of the Savannah Port and multiple infrastructure projects in the city of Atlanta that were done faster and at a lower cost because of our cooperative relationship with the state of Georgia.
Thank you. You were my first guy for the next round of questions. I'm going to move to Felicia Moore for this, and I apologize for skipping you there. Council President Moore, the growth of the film industry in Metro Atlanta has been a boon for many people. And at the same time, filming can be extremely disruptive to neighborhoods. It can snarl traffic, make business difficult for local merchants, and a lot of other things. Would you support funneling a portion of the fees paid by film companies back into the neighborhoods that are affected?
So I think that is something we can certainly look at, particularly if we funnel it back to make sure that we're mitigating any of the disruptive nature of the film industry. And we are blessed to have the film industry here because it does help our economy, and it certainly put Atlanta on the map. And when I'm looking at movies, I enjoy seeing and trying to pick out where in Atlanta they're being filmed. I had this question last night at a meet and greet I had downtown, that we're also concerned about certain locations being utilized over and over and over again. And the people felt, because we have a lot of residents who live downtown, I felt that they weren't getting any peace. So I do think this is kind of similar the discussion that we had about our parks and the park utilization and what people feel is an overutilization of certain parks, to see if we can work with the movie industry, maybe even show them some of the greater places in our city so that they're not always going to the same place over and over again. But a lot of it is a communication issue, I'm finding, where people are not able to adequately plan for the fact that a movie's coming and their parking may be limited, or there may be a particular noise. They don't know exactly what's going on. And so I think that we can certainly work with our office in the mayor's office to make sure that we're doing more communication, advanced communication to the neighborhood. And then if we have those fees, making sure that we're using some of those fees to help mitigate the impact in those neighborhoods.
Thanks. Councilman Brown, you're in a new location.
I am. I apologize. I had to do a little conversion here.
And so what's your take on whether some of those proceeds should be funneled back into the neighborhoods where filming is taking place?
So I apologize. I literally just logged back on, so I missed the entire question.
I'm sorry. Just real quickly, we all know what good things the film industry has done in Metro Atlanta, but it can be very disruptive. So would you support funneling a portion of the fees paid by film companies back into the neighborhoods that are affected.
Absolutely. And I think outside of just doing that, I believe in, and I've mentioned this before, and I spoke to Mayor Bottoms about this, I believe the city should be taking an equity position on what is being filmed within the city of Atlanta. Right now, Invest Georgia, that's ran by the state, can invest into projects. And one of the things as mayor that I really want to move forward is the ability for Invest Atlanta to begin to invest into TV and film within the city. And not so where we're only receiving permit fees or fees from these projects, but where we actually have an equity stake. They come into our city, they use our residents, they use our talent, they use our facilities. And, yes, we may receive a funnel of revenue into the state through our tourist dollars and all of that, but I think we need to have more of an investment in our community. So I would definitely support that.
Sharon Gay?
I'm very interested in that idea. I would seriously entertain it. My office is downtown where there's a lot of filming. My neighborhood, we have a lot of filming. So I'm very aware of this from a traffic snarling standpoint, and then things as granular as the lights are shining in your kitchen window at midnight and you're trying to get ready for bed and they're filming The Walking Dead in the neighborhood, in the yard behind you. But I think we need, again, it gets back to being more intentional about how, first of all, be more intentional about how we go out issuing permits. I agree with President Moore that sometimes communication is the problem. You find out 30 minutes in advance that something's going to be filmed across the street. So having much better coordination and communication between the film companies and the private citizens, either the immediate neighbors and also just the neighborhood association itself. Secondly, I think we look at what is the impact. Again, if the light is shining in my kitchen at midnight, a payment to the Inman Park Neighborhood Association isn't necessarily going to help me. So I think it'd be a good idea to really talk more closely and carefully with neighborhoods that are having filming to think about what is the impact, what could we ameliorate, and is some of it a better job by the city on managing the permitting and the lane closures and all the things that go along. But on the other hand, is there enough of an impact to the neighborhood that there is some revenue compensation would be appropriate? As a lawyer, I always try to think about the law, and I have to think about that a little bit, but I think that's an interesting proposition. But I think what it really gets to is being thoughtful about the impact while embracing the industry, because I think we all are proud of the films we see that are filmed here, and we recognize the economic impact, but there's a very granular impact on the neighborhoods where there is a lot of filming. And we need to take a good hard look at what that is, what that impact is, and how we can best ameliorate it.
Kasim Reed.
I think that the motion picture sector, which grew under my leadership, cooperating with the state, from being a $400 million sector for us to a $9.5 billion sector employing 34,000 people, is healthy for us overall. We stood up the Office of Film and Entertainment and established the fee regime for the city of Atlanta. I believe it's appropriate that we share that revenue stream with neighborhoods that are impacted. I also think that it's appropriate that we demand to have a communications plan for filming for our neighborhoods. That will help you plan more, anticipate what's coming, because I think overall, having this business for our city and our state bodes well for us in the years to come. But a neighborhood should have a communications plan, not 30 minutes notice or an hour notice of the film schedule that lays out what is going to be done in the neighborhood, what are the hours, and for goodness sakes, when is it going to be over? And I think if neighborhoods have that information, one, they can plan for it, and two, they will know what the expectations are, and the city should insist that the expectations are honored.
Councilman Dickens.
Yeah, I want to make sure the very first part of your question, it's been a while since you stated it. If you could state it again.
It was basically that the city gets a great deal from the film industry, but there's a lot of disruption in the neighborhoods where filming takes place. And so the bottom line is the question, should some of the fees that are collected be redirected back into the neighborhoods that are affected by the filming?
Right. Thank you. I was trying to get clarity on when you said some. Yes. So definitely, yes, some of the fees that's collected should be directed back into the neighborhood, the neighborhoods and communities that are affected. And we'll have to come up with a mechanism to do that and how those communities collect those funds and what's the process for them to further use them. But I think that that is a good go forward plan. Across the city, been a citywide council member, I get calls maybe on a bi-monthly basis or every 2 months, I should say, about some filming that's taking place that I have to make a call on to ask for support. Did this go through the proper process? And we're operating a 24-hour hotline to respond to concerns, but and then also to make sure that neighbors and businesses, get the proper notice that filming is going to occur. I think it'll be important to right off the bat to begin to look at how these are actually playing out. Is this occurring? Is the hotline open and operating in a way that this information can be disseminated quickly and dealt with right away? I also believe that the penalties should be in place, and the penalty money should go, a significant portion of the penalty money should go to the communities as well. So first of all, when you violate as a film producer, when you violate the rules by not giving proper notice or not, or being, out of ordinance or out of proper order, then those penalties and fines should go to the communities that are adjacent and nearby, and therefore to go along with the other fees associated with it. I think, as was mentioned earlier, an equity play would be fantastic because it can also go to our arts and our youth programs and also for training, because I don't like it when film companies come here and bring all their talent with them. I want to see more of the local talent being used by film companies because they'll have some respect for the communities that they're in just by proximity.
Thank you. Our next question, let's start with Felicia Moore. Our tree canopy is one of the defining characteristics of our city. At 48% canopy coverage, we have the highest coverage of any city of our size nationwide. However, this asset is at risk. Have you signed the Canopy pledge, and what are your plans for preservation and expansion of the tree canopy?
I don't know that I've signed the Canopy pledge, and I certainly love the goal of 48% of our tree canopy. And I think we're going to have to be creative on how we continue to keep that 48%. While I understand we certainly do not like, and I've still seen it occurring, the fragrant sort of clear cutting that's taking place in place of development. And I believe we have a lot of areas that we can preserve the tree cover, particularly the old growth tree cover. But I also see many areas, particularly here in Northwest Atlanta, while we want to preserve those trees, we're watching them go away. And what I mean by that is we're allowing invasives, particularly kudzu and privet and others, just to take over in these areas where we have undisturbed old natural growth trees, and we're just letting them be destroyed. So I think we need to do several things. One is see where we can preserve it and making sure that those trees are not being wiped out. But secondly, continuing things like Trees Atlanta and others are doing is to continue to build trees or plant trees that will be our old growth forests in the future. So I will look at that pledge. I don't think that I've signed it, but I've signed and looked at many pledges. I would pledge right now that 48% puts us above the mark, and we need to stay there and do everything that we can to continue that.
Kasim Reed, do you support the Canopy pledge?
I haven't received the Canopy pledge, but what I do support is preserving our tree canopy and acting decisively to do it, and to be on the side of trees rather than being on the side of developers, and developing a policy that at the end of the day is in favor of protecting our tree canopy, because it really is our ocean. It's our mountain vista. It's what makes the city of Atlanta unique. And I think that we should have a highly aggressive plan to plant new trees as well and to preserve what we have. I also believe that our arborist division for the city of Atlanta needs to be fully staffed and fully built out, because right now it's grossly underpersoned. And I think that that is hurting the cultivation and maintenance of our tree canopy. So what I plan to do is to be a mayor that supports our tree canopy beyond its current level, because maintaining what we have simply is not enough. So I will partner with Trees Atlanta to do it. I will point out that during my 8 years of service, we had the largest green space expansion of parks and green space in the city of Atlanta in more than 40 years. And so I will continue to have that kind of vigilance in protecting, preserving, and growing our tree canopy. And I will be inclined to come down on the side of trees rather than coming down on the side of real estate developers.
Councilman Brown.
Yes, sir. So, I've had an opportunity to look at the Canopy Pledge, and I would definitely sign on to the pledge. I think that, again, if we're moving into being a proactive Atlanta, I mean, what the pledge is requiring of us as leaders just makes total sense. But what I see as a contradiction is that when we have land like the old Atlanta prison farmland, that instead of us taking this pledge and applying it to land that we should be preserving, like that land, instead we're building a police and fire training facility on it. And I find that to be a complete confliction with this pledge and what we say we stand by as a city. As the pledge calls for, I think that we need to be preserving our green space as much as we can. We need to be creating experiences with the green space that we have. The Office of City Design came up with some incredible ways in which we could do that and ways in which we could leverage property. And I think we need to stop allowing outside forces and corporate interests to get in the way of us protecting our city forests. I mean, that alone is the heart of our city. And not only by us preserving our trees, but it creates a healthy life for us as residents. It improves, our ability to, breathe in great oxygen and continue to, really, and a lot of folks don't realize that it reduces a lot of the stormwater that we see happening in Atlanta that causes a ton of flooding because of our failing infrastructure in this city. So I would definitely support the pledge. And I think that in doing so, we need to preserve our green space in Atlanta. Thank you.
Sharon Gay, have you looked at the pledge, and would you sign it?
I haven't seen it either. Councilmember Brown showing us up by having looked at it, but it certainly sounds like something that I would embrace. So let me tell you what I do embrace. When I look out my office window, which is in the northwest corner of the 48th floor of the SunTrust Plaza building, I see three things really that are distinctive. One, I see the incredible richness of the urban corridor going up Peachtree Street from my office to Midtown and to Buckhead. Number two, I see our neighborhoods. I see how extraordinarily vibrant and different our neighborhoods are and how close they are to our urban centers and how distinctive that is for Atlanta. And three, I see trees. Even in the winter, I see trees. And it's an extraordinary view of our urban forest. And that is one of the things, as others have said, that makes our city distinctive, our neighborhoods and our trees. So I am all in favor of thoughtful, effective ways to protect our tree canopy and expand it. Because a lot of us in our older neighborhoods, we're losing trees left and right. The older trees, the city trees, the street trees, we're losing them constantly. So we've got to constantly plant more trees. It's not just about preserving a tree here or there, but we've got to constantly plant more trees. We need to be much more transparent about what the tree recompense money is being used for. I know, there's been a lot of work on trying to create a tree ordinance that actually preserves trees and creates flexible ways for that to be done. Because where we seem to have a lot of our problems is in clear cutting of individual lots, or taking small houses, tearing them down, clear cutting a lot, building a larger house, and it's 10 or 15 years before the new trees that are planted catch up to the canopy effect of what we had before. But as others have said, it's an extraordinary visual resource, but also an environmental resource, and we need to be thoughtful and modern and creative about how to build the policies that protect the conservation areas and expand our canopy, not just save it.
Councilman Dickens.
Yeah, so I skimmed the pledge and I actually appreciated most of it. There were a couple of areas that I think that I wanted to review again, and there were some kind of all or nothing type portions of it. So in theory and pretty much in significant portion, I support it. As a city councilman, I have supported the Atlanta City Council's introduction of a new tree protection ordinance. And this is going on right now, as stated. It is taking a while, but the goal of the proposed tree protection ordinance is first and foremost to prioritize the protection of our tree canopy in the city of Atlanta. And the draft that we currently have has already been looked at and reworked by Trees Atlanta and certain other protection groups. And it specifically calls out for us to preserve our tree canopy, as well as, our well-recognized integral part of the city's identity is our trees. We're often referred to as the city and the forest. And so to be able to make sure that we go about this tree protection ordinance thoroughly is what we're doing now and what we'll have to do in the new administration. And I have supported this rewriting of the ordinance in conjunction with the Department of City Planning. And I support our efforts to have economic growth and development in the city while maintaining our tree canopy. And I also like to say one additional part to this that often, of course, yes, working with Trees Atlanta and building and, preserving our tree canopy, but also it's important to talk about kudzu and evasives, because this management or mismanagement of that is also hurting our trees. It's choking out our trees. So this is important, particularly in lower income areas where they don't have the financial wherewithal to do some of the things that are necessary. So I think we have to have a robust plan with our arborist and with our city planning department to make sure that all of the above is taken care of.
Thank you. Kasim Reed, this is a pie in the sky type of question. We don't know when it'll pass, or right now we don't know if it's going to pass, but it seems likely we're going to have some sort of major federal infrastructure bill by the end of the year. If you could choose one major infrastructure project for the city of Atlanta, what would it be?
It would be to run light rail from the Lindbergh-MARTA station until the Clifton corridor for our neighbors at the CDC and Emory University. And that's the busiest corridor. It's not supported by public transit, certainly rail or light rail. And I think that the 3 to 5 stops that would be included along that corridor really would change the economy of the region forever. Following that, of course, would be completing light rail around the Atlanta Beltline. But I would be competing for significant federal support for that corridor because of the CDC and Emory University being there. And also because 6,000 residents in that community raised their hands and decided to join Atlanta. That was the largest expansion of our city since the Buckhead community was annexed into Atlanta. So my focus would be to secure funding for that because I think that we have a unique moment in time to do it. And I'm experienced in securing large federal funding because of my record and relationships with the current administration. The last time we won 4 out of 6 Tiger grants for transportation projects. We won a $30 million Choice Neighborhood Grant. And of course, working cooperatively with Governor Deal and Senator Isaacson, we won 101 approvals and funding for the deepening of the Port of Savannah, which has provided a boom to the metropolitan region's economy.
Felicia Moore, you've got one big thing you could do. What would it be?
Well, I would hope that we could get a separate bill for just transportation related issues, because we certainly have a great need for that. But if I had to pick, it would be one above ground and one below ground. So above ground, definitely getting the Beltline rail initiative done, because it was promised to people, but more than that, it's a way to connect north, south, east, and west in this city and give us a connectivity that we don't have, and that I believe will help us alleviate some traffic. And I also would love to get those Renew Atlanta bond projects that got shelved fixed. But below ground, I think we forget about below ground, and we certainly still have 100-year-old CSOs, combined sewer overflows, that could fail at any minute. We're talking about building on density, but we're not talking about capacity or water and sewer treatment plants that are outdated and falling in repair. So there are many needs, and we're going to need to prioritize those, and we need to be thinking comprehensively when we're talking about let's build density, but nobody's talking about the infrastructure to support it. And so I would be looking, if we are going to move and be in a more denser city, making sure that we're matching the infrastructure needs to support it along with it.
Councilman Dickens.
Yeah, as others have stated, it's hard to pick just one, and hopefully we won't have to pick just one, because we'll get our outsized share of this $1 trillion to $3 trillion package. First would be to do what we already designed that we should do, which is the Beltline streetcar plan, which included light rail around the Beltline, and for me, also light rail going out to Campbellton Road, which is also in our plan. Those folks down there take a 40-minute bus ride to get to a transit station, and I think that having light rail is important to improve the opportunities and outcomes for those individuals in an equitable way. I also would love to see more work done on our sewers in terms of below ground. As Council President Moore mentioned, we still have a lot of flash floods in Atlanta, which results in a whole lot of stormwater drainage problems. And so this is important as we go back to the previous question related to trees, because these significant weather events erodes the ground and makes trees less stable with their roots, et cetera. And so I think that if we can do light rail around the Beltline and out to Campbellton Road, and also stormwater infrastructure, I think that will be fantastic. And one day, my goal is to have MARTA be free for all riders, as they have in Kansas City, Boston, and Olympia.
And Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I would definitely leverage the federal infrastructure dollars to really lift up the Beltline. I think we've already laid the foundation to be able to install light rail. I would really focus on very light rail. It's a rail technology that's half the cost of traditional light rail. I would focus on developing that, and I would focus in the area of between Murphy's Crossing and West Side Park to really contribute to economic mobility in some of our more underserved communities, to ensure that we have a Beltline system and a rail system that is operating, in which residents in low-income communities could participate in. And then the second Beltline, I would focus around Krog Street Market and Piedmont Park to really expand the opportunities for folks coming from these communities to have access to some of the amenities in which many don't have the opportunity to experience. If given the luxury of choosing a second option, I would really focus on bus rapid transit along Camilton Road. I think that we've got to do more around Camilton Road, and I think that bus rapid transit is a solution for that. And I think that it is equivalent to the opportunities that could exist around our rail system. So that's where I would focus my allocation of funding.
And Sharon Gay.
I'm hoping for a moonshot moment, that we get a bill, it's got a lot in it, and Atlanta was really important in this last election, and Atlanta and Georgia, and particularly Atlanta, and I think we ought to be at the front of the line. My number one, I also would pick the Clifton Corridor as my number one project, because I think by far it connects the most riders to the highest numbers of jobs and creates a kind of jobs neighborhood connectivity that should have been built long ago, but certainly ought to be built now. I would also knock on the door and beg for our extra share. I'd look at these interstate capping ideas. We have great ideas underway for downtown, midtown, and Buckhead to cap the portions of the interstate that created a lot of the racial inequities in our city that we still see today by dividing neighborhoods and dislocating poor Black residents in order to build these interstates. And so I'd love to use some found moonshot dollars to do those capping projects, reknit those parts of the city back together, and provide greater connectivity for the parts of the city that already exist today. I think Hamilton Road is also an important one, but I think that the next mayor of Atlanta will be in a good position because of what Atlanta is and what we have delivered to really get near the front of the line and seek the maximum benefit we could get from that bill. Sewers would be great as well. We do have some other ways to get sewer funding, but I would particularly focus on transportation because I think that's the hardest thing for us to fund at scale just within our city or within our region because the costs are just so great.
Thank you. Councilman Brown. You'll notice that we've gotten through about an hour of a debate and we haven't mentioned crime yet, which maybe is a record for you folks. But
hallelujah.
We are currently authorized for about 2,000 police officers, but the actual number employed, as I understand it, is far less than that. What do you believe is the right number of officers to effectively police a city of this size and with these issues?
Honestly, Tom, I have no idea. One of the things that I speak about on my platform is that we need to do a reevaluation of the function and responsibilities of the police. I passed the legislation to call for a Department of Public Safety and Wellness, which is a part of a holistic system where we would have a 24-hour non-emergency response unit where we can remove the community-oriented functions from the police, like quality of life issues with our unsheltered population, mental health, substance abuse, and move these functions over to this non-emergency response unit because our police are not skilled and trained to handle these things. They're not mental health professionals. They're not, social workers. And until we can truly properly evaluate where we are with the number of police, I can't just give you a number, but I can tell you this. We have over 1,600 police officers currently on our force, and that's more than the state, national, and peer city average. So it's really tough for me to just say, because we have an authorized level and number of police, that means we need more police officers. I think once we remove police from handling administrative duties, quality of life duties, the things in which they should not be doing, I think we'll have more officers actually addressing egregious crimes on the streets of Atlanta, and then we can determine how many more police officers we want to add.
Sharon Gay.
We clearly need more than we have, but I don't think there's a magic number for some of the reasons Councilmember Brown stated. First of all, Atlanta Police Foundation is doing an analysis of what the optimal, what might recommend is the optimal force, and I would look to that analysis. But you first have to decide what is it you want the police to do, and then you hire the right people, give them the right training, give them the right equipment, and hold them accountable for that. And as others have said tonight and other times, we need to get the police out of the business of doing the things that mental health professionals and social service organizations are better equipped to do. But also it's a question of smarter policing. We need to use technology. We need to focus on problem hotspots. We need to be better partners with the county to make sure that violent criminals stay in jail. We need to partner better with our federal and state partners to have more modern strategies. Because you're not going to hire 700 or 800 people overnight. And there's always an attrition of about 100, 150 a year. So if you want to hire 800, you really got to hire 1,000. So the key is to have a strong enough presence that people do feel like they're seeing the police in their neighborhoods and they're feeling more comfortable about the kind of coverage we got. But we also have to deploy better. We have to get the police back out into the neighborhoods. That's part of the reason I think people feel like, oh gosh, we don't have any police, because they don't see them. And community policing is not just a little office over in the corner. It needs to be the culture of how we deploy our resources. And so that the officers on the beat know the owner of the corner store, they know the pastor down the street, they know the school principal, they know the kids, and know what things are happening and where crime is forming. And so if you adopt these 21st century policing strategies and have smart, effective policing, clear requirements, clear communication, clear command and training, and better use of technology, then we could better deploy the force, whatever size it is.
Felicia Moore.
So the number is not a magic number and one we should focus on. The number of 2,000 came up in the Campbell administration when he said he wanted to hire 2,000 officers by the year 2000. This is 2021 and we're still chasing a number. I think we may have hit it once, but it didn't last very long. So it's not really the number. It's where are these officers deployed? And I have asked that as a council member over years and found that we have quite a few of our officers that are sworn officers who are counted in that number, who are in administrative tasks and not on the street solving crimes or community policing. So one of the things I want to do is on the short term, get them to at least spend one day, 8 hours of their 40-hour shift, backing up those officers that are on the street to give them more capacity to patrol. They can handle the accident on the road that may take an officer out of service for an hour or two. Well, the patrol officers will really get an opportunity to patrol. And then on the longer term, look and see how we can make more of those jobs that are administrative with a sworn officer, civilian based positions, and keep more of them on the street. The other thing we need to look at is, of course, as people have talked about, is getting people to augment our officers. And that would be those who are mental health professionals for people who are having behavioral and mental health crises. Police officers don't want to deal with that because they're not trained in it. And they would welcome the assistance to be able to take those things, to take that off the street as well. And I just want to end by saying it's not even the number of officers that is our issue, because they do a good job of arresting people. What happens is what happens at the court when they are let out, violent and repeat offenders.
Kasim Reed.
We need a minimum of 2,000 police officers actively policing the city of Atlanta. Anyone who says that more officers don't make a difference in reducing crime haven't reduced crime in a major American city. When I was under my leadership, we hired 900 police officers. We built the biggest police force in the history of the city of Atlanta, and crime went to 40-year lows. And we also hired a terrific chief in George Turner and another terrific chief under Chief Shields' leadership. So according to officers that I know, our police force has been allowed to deteriorate to 1,400 or less, while the city grew by 71,400 people. And so you can't have the growth that we enjoyed over the last 10 years and not have a police force that accompanies that. And don't let anyone convince you that we can't hire 600 or 700 or 800 officers. That's just not so. Under my leadership, we hired more than 200 police officers a year for 6 out of the 8 years that I had the honor of leading this city. The issue in this campaign is the fact that violent crime has increased 62%. That's the issue. The other issue is that 157 people were murdered last year all throughout the city of Atlanta. We're on track to have more people murdered in the city of Atlanta this year. And so last Friday, I had the honor of being endorsed by the Atlanta Police Union. The Friday before that, the Firefighters Union endorsed me. And so the people that run into the fire and toward gunfire trust me to keep this city safe. And I intend to do so if I'm elected mayor.
Andre Dickens.
Yeah, the first job of the mayor of a city is to make sure that everyone is safe and that they feel safe. So last week I went to Zone 1's roll call, 7 in the morning. And out of 14 beats, there were only 11 officers. And when you look across the city and you multiply that by a number of missed beats, those officers end up having to cover larger territories. And then if an incident is happening, when they get back up, that's just that many fewer officers to cover the rest of that zone and therefore the rest of the city. So we do need more police officers. We're down to a number to where we have to hire more. The number I've suggested is 250 officers in the first year to get to 400 in the second year. And of course, there will be some attrition, but we've actually come down on that attrition over the past year. And we're trying to get that under control. One thing that helped was that in 2019, the Bottoms administration and this council gave police the largest raise in the history of the city. And so that's important because individuals are now trying to join our force. And so it will be, the ability for us to actually hire lateral hires. That means officers from other jurisdictions across the Southeast or even across the nation. They will want to come to our city to work. We'll also have great recruitment, and I have a plan for that as well. But I did want to say that I was the public safety chairman for city council in 2017 when we hit the city's lowest at 40 years. But we kept going. We got better in 2018 and 2019. Crime was down. And at the beginning of 2020, crime was down. And remembering when the new administration came in, we were at 1,770 officers. So while we have looked at 2039 as the authorized use of force, I think when I'm starting as mayor in January, we'll relook at that with the Atlanta Police Foundation to see what the true number is, because we were down in crime even at 1,770. So with my 250 officers, we'll be right around that 1,770 that we were in 2018 when we were down in crime even better than we were in 17 and before.
Thank you. Councilman Dickens, I'm going to stick with you for the next question and start back in the other direction. In your view, what is the role of Invest Atlanta? And do you propose any changes in how taxpayer dollars are invested?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had the pleasure and honor of serving on Invest Atlanta's board for 3 years. And in that time, we incentivized a lot of awesome projects, a lot of companies to come here. And we did a lot of work to fix what was broken in terms of incentives around Atlanta given to developers that did not provide affordable housing. I passed legislation that stopped that from Fulton County and other development authorities from getting our tax dollars being used for development that did not provide any housing affordability. That was my legislation that stopped that. And to go further, we have to utilize Invest Atlanta only really on projects that deserve the extra helping hand that otherwise would not be developed. So giving more incentives to individual companies or developers that can pencil out these deals without our help is not going to be a practice that I would keep. I want to focus our development in areas that would otherwise not get development. We still have places that are in a food desert that are desperately looking for grocery stores to be incentivized, for medical facilities to be incentivized, for the blight in those areas, particularly on the south side of town, to have development come in to fill in some of those properties with new developments and to do development without displacement. Invest Atlanta should be helping us build small businesses to help them thrive and scaling businesses, but also to be very competitive across the region as we compete in this high-tech space, to be able to make sure that we hold new companies' feet to the fire. When they come to Atlanta, like I'm doing, I tell them, I'm not just interested in how many buildings you build in Atlanta, but how many Atlantans are working in your buildings. So we must train and prepare people in this workforce to get these great jobs. And that's what I do with TechBridge. And that's what we'll do when I'm the mayor of Atlanta. We will thrive. We will help individuals thrive as Invest Atlanta continues to attract people to this city.
Sharon Gay.
Sorry, a little slow on the mute there. You know, the state law is very clear about what development authorities do, and that's what Invest Atlanta is Atlanta's development authority. And they have broad powers to promote an economic development, industry, trade, and tourism. And they have tools that the city itself doesn't have. And so they're a very important tool to promote economic development and equitable development in the city. But they have to be carefully applied, and that really requires a policy direction from the mayor and council as to how the development authority should act. I see the primary roles as being one, just being the economic development recruiter for the city, being the touch point for businesses and industries considering looking into investing in Atlanta. Sometimes it's done in partnership with the state. Sometimes it's done alone. That's a critically important tool that nobody else in city government really has the tools to do. Two is using the incentives that the city does have, whether it's the tax allocation districts or tax abatement or the city's share of the low-income housing tax credits and bonds to provide development. And then the third thing that it can do, I think, is help focus and shape an economic development plan. The city needs an economic development plan. That's one of the first things I would work on, is work with the council and with the business community and with private sector partners like the chamber to come up with a comprehensive economic development plan, and then use the incentives that the city has in a targeted way rather than in just a reactive way. I think in recent years, too much of the incentive work has been just sort of reacting to what somebody brings us. Well, we ought to decide what it is we need and where those incentives may most be needed, which may be the areas of the city that haven't seen as much development to really promote affordable housing. But let's make a policy decision as a city to what we want to incentivize, and then tailor the use of our incentives to those projects as much as possible. Now, you've always got to be flexible. Sometimes the state may bring you a great project and the development authority has to be a conduit for issuing bonds or other tools. And we need to make sure that we continue to be nimble to do that as well.
Kasim Reed.
The purpose of Invest Atlanta is to support the economic development function and capability of the capital city of the state of Georgia. And so what we used it for, I served as chairman of that entity for 8 years and funded it and made it operational again because it was broke when I took over as mayor. We won 17 US and regional headquarters and attracted literally thousands of jobs into the city of Atlanta proper. We won Fortune 500 headquarters like NCR, Pulte Homes, which was a Fortune 500 business that was based in Michigan. And so we had a great deal of success bringing jobs into the city limits. And we also led on the CODA development, which has been wildly successful in attracting technology businesses into the Midtown corridor. So the bottom line is the job of that entity is to create jobs and retain jobs in the city of Atlanta. It also facilitates major projects. So when you look at a project like Ponce City Market, which was done under my leadership and changed the Ponce corridor, When you look at projects like the $1.7 billion Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that would have been impossible without Invest Atlanta being a strong partner. But the number one priority is to generate jobs, and it also allows you to be a strong partner to the state of Georgia. Typically, when the state is recruiting a business with a large number of jobs, the city would contribute under my leadership 1/3, and Governor Deal's administration would commit 2/3. That's why we had the largest level of job creation and business relocations into the city of Atlanta in 40 years.
Antonio Brown.
Yeah, so Invest Atlanta creates programs and initiatives focused on developing and fostering public-private partnerships that are really focused around job creation and economic growth. And they also concentrate around neighborhood revitalization and investment, and of course, innovation and entrepreneurship. You know, where I would like to see Invest Atlanta focus more on is around economic mobility within the city. I think that unfortunately, we haven't done a great job of that. And I think, a reflection of that is the condition in which Atlanta is in, and we continue to deal with regards to the rise in crime, the rise of our unsheltered population, the rise of some of the other things that have transpired. And I think that Atlanta should be focusing more of our investment on creating programs and initiatives that can support that. I personally believe Atlanta's done a great job of bringing corporations into bringing new business into the city of Atlanta, which is a key function of this development authority. And I think that they've done a really great job of providing big corporations incentives. And we've seen it time and time again from BlackRock on down. Corporations that are booming, doing well, and Invest Atlanta has invested into their businesses, provided them incentives, and in exchange has created opportunities around job creation and economic growth in the city. But where we fall short is, where does that meet the needs of our lower income communities that are completely disconnected from the resources and opportunities in which Invest Atlanta brings to the table? I think we as a city have a relentless responsibility to ensure that all of our residents have equal access and opportunity to jobs, to the tools that they need to better their lives and strengthen their neighborhoods and communities. And I would like to see Invest Atlanta really focus in on that. Right now, Georgia State University is focused on the $250 million workforce development bond. I think through this bond, Invest Atlanta could play a critical role in not only leveraging those funds, but working in partnership with WorkSource Atlanta and some of our other city agencies to really maximize on the opportunity to create economic mobility throughout the city.
And Felicia Moore.
So when I first got on council, I had the honor of serving as chair of the Community Development Committee for all of my first term. And in that, I had an opportunity to sit on what was then called, and it's the same organization, Atlanta Development Authority. And what we did there that I find quite different than where we have found ourselves now is looking at our neighborhoods, looking at corridors, looking at areas that needed investment and focusing on that investment. What Invest Atlanta has become is beyond a little bit beyond the scope, because it's the economic development arm of the city. But over the years, I've realized it's become more of the head and more of the body. And so I think we need to get back to looking at the council, making sure that we are addressing the needs of their constituents in their district, setting policy, setting priorities that we would like to see this arm work towards and move towards, making sure that whoever our commissioner of planning has a good voice and role in it. It used to be where it was really helped being driven from a vision that came from our planning department, as well as the council, as well as the mayor, versus these one-off projects. And as we're looking at those projects, also looking at how the incentives are given and what are we giving them for. Of course, we love to say we're giving the incentives for affordable housing projects, but the reality is, are we giving them for that, or is it just to give money? Giving a major corporation $300,000 doesn't make for an incentive to me. What it does make for is just $300,000. We need to make sure that we're getting back what we're giving in incentives and increasing the incentives, particularly as it relates to the percentage of affordable housing.
Thank you. Sharon Gay, I'm going to begin this question with you, and this may be the last question that we have before your final remarks. When the Beltline was being envisioned, it was anticipated that it would encourage transit, community development, development of underdeveloped areas, and affordable housing. And it's done a lot of good things, but it hasn't achieved all those goals. What are your plans to fulfill the original promise of the Beltline to our neighborhoods?
First of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving us 2 minutes to answer. We've been forced into 1-minute answers for so long. We can actually breathe and think just a little bit. If those of you who read the supporter report today, David Pindra did a great history. I think it was David did a great history of where the original idea of the Beltline, which was the parks and trails, and then the transit got added. And and all of those are laudable goals. We've not been able to achieve them. The original financial plans projections didn't even come close to where we would need to be, even to do the parks and trails. The projections were off. The Great Recession happened. Everything got more expensive. And so we've got to have a good hard look as a community as to where we need to go and how we can get there. And certainly the policy that was adopted with the original Beltline plan was the parks and trails, and then and eventually the transit. I think the steps that have been taken now to get the parks and trail, or the trail element, completed faster was a wise choice. To use the special service districts and some other structures around, really focus on getting the trails completed, because that has been the extraordinary element of connecting neighborhoods. We've connected neighborhoods that never even had a way to walk to one another before. You could barely drive from some of these neighborhoods to other neighborhoods. And now we're being connected through the trails. And by having this sort of urban park necklace has an extraordinary benefit to our city. And even if you never had any transit, that would be an extraordinary benefit. But the transit analysis is, I think, where it needs to be, which is with MARTA, who is our transit planner and transit provider. I would be actively at the table with them saying, let's take really hard look at the Beltline. What can we do first? What should we do first? What's the right sequence? What's the right mode? How do we get it implemented? And in a way that enhances the MARTA system. Because what we have now is a system that sort of, people describe it as having arteries and veins, but not many capillaries. And the Beltline can be part of that capillary system that reaches more people and therefore makes our overall transit system more functional. Now, it'll be a change in the way you experience the Beltline. And I think that's the other thing people have to be realistic about. But I would be very focused on, as I said, focusing with MARTA on how best to analyze it, how best to implement it, what the modes in what order, and connect it to the rest of our transit system as rapidly as we could.
Antonio Brown.
My apologies, Tom. I was getting my food delivery because y'all didn't provide dinner on this call. I would just say that I think that the Beltline was an incredible opportunity for the city of Atlanta to connect communities and really focus on the economic development along the Beltline. The problem that we faced is that as we've continued to build out the trails and connect our communities, specifically, most recently, we've been connecting the west side of Atlanta within our Beltline, building out our paths and trails. I think what we've realized is that one of the areas we've fallen short is affordable housing. And part of that reason is because along, I know Councilmember Dickens is going to speak to this when he's called on, but he created an inclusionary zoning policy along the Beltline that would require developers to build affordable housing. The parking structures that were required as a part of this infrastructure and housing development, it became so expensive that you had developers that didn't want to build. They would rather build outside of the Beltline rather than build along the Beltline. So I think we've got to figure out a way where we can continue to develop the Beltline and build out our passing trails along with our light rail once we get to that point. But we got to create the Beltline so that it's truly inclusive of all of its residents, and that all residents have access to being able to utilize the Beltline, but also build affordable housing along it. And I think we've got to provide more incentives to developers. We've got to provide ways for developers to build potentially without having to build overly sized parking structures to accommodate the development happening along the Beltline. And that way you have more of a comprehensive system that works for all of the residents, and you can address the lack of affordable housing that's been developed. So that's my perspective.
Kasim Reed.
Well, I think first and foremost, the Beltline has worked. It's $600 million in public investment. It's yielded about $6 billion in private capital and private investment. During the second term of my administration as mayor, the Beltline was headed towards insolvency. Fortunately, we were able to renegotiate the agreement between the Atlanta public school system and the city of Atlanta so that we could continue to fund it. And then we had another challenge around equity. And under my leadership, we won an $18 million Tiger grant from President Obama's administration that allowed for the trail construction to continue. I think that most important goal for us now is to build 5,600 units of affordable housing as a minimum with a 60% AMI. And so I think that if we achieve that goal, then the Atlanta Beltline will be what it was meant to be. And that is paths and trails that united 46 neighborhoods throughout the city of Atlanta in a way that we simply were not united before. But that won't matter if the Atlanta Beltline isn't a place for everyone. And the way to make sure it's a place for everyone is to ensure that we have a minimum of 5,600 units of affordable housing tied to 60% AMI. If we achieve that objective, then the Beltline would have done what we meant it to do as a city, and it will be the center of Atlanta's heartbeat, and it will go on for generations after generations after generations. If we don't, it will be yet another thing in the life of our city that breaks the city of Atlanta apart and creates barriers where there should be paths.
Felicia Moore.
If I could ask you to answer the question after the answers, I'm quite fuzzy on what your question was now.
It had to do with the Beltline and the fact that the Beltline was envisioned as accomplishing a lot of things having to do with development, affordable housing, and not all of those goals have been achieved. What would you do to improve the Beltline?
Well, I think we continue to work on those things that have not been achieved. We have done quite a considerable work on the trails, as well as the green space and murals, and people really love the activities that they have in and around the Beltline. The affordable housing, I remember fighting very hard to make sure that we put the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the Beltline. And unfortunately, that did not meet out the way that it should have. And so we have to find ways to mitigate the housing costs in and around the Beltline, because now that property is prime property in many areas around the Beltline that were not at one time. And so we have a lot of speculation, and we have a lot of building that is increasing the cost for people to be able to live on the Beltline. But one of the things that people really want to see on the Beltline is the connectivity, not only with the trails and green space, but the connectivity with the transit. And I do think that, that was put on hold and put on the back burner when we wanted to build the streetcar to nowhere. But that should have been where we should have started, because what we're running up against now is the fact that the Beltline and its funding will soon come to an end. And so being able to leverage those funds with those that we may be able to get from the federal government and others is kind of waning on us. I do think the transit piece is an important piece to get people connected and to get people out of their cars and moving around north, south, east, and west in our city. And I believe that we can continue, as always, to build on the trails and the green space and the murals and all the things that we love about it. But all of those things are things that we need to continue to work on, even when we get to the point where the tax allocation district and its funding has ceased.
Thank you. And lastly, Andre Dickens.
Yeah, great cities have great amenities. And for sure, the Beltline is a fantastic amenity as it is right now as a walking and cycling amenity. But it will get greater when we have transit on the Beltline as was intended. That will connect us and keep us out of traffic, but get people connected to not only where they're going each day, but to opportunities in life, which is very important to me. I was serving on the board of the Beltline from 2014 to 2016. And the very first meeting that I attended, there was green, they had green, yellow, red in terms of what's going on. And so green was in the trail development and some other things were yellow, but the red was affordable housing. And I'm catching up and I'm looking and the meeting just kept going. And I said, well, let's go back to this red. Why is this red? Well, we're supposed to have 5,600 units and we don't have 5,600 units and we're not on a pathway for it. But it was as though it was being accepted that it was too hard of a task to hit. And we had this trust fund that wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And so no one really applied themselves to have a true course correction until I created the first inclusionary zoning policy in the Southeast. And that policy is that the Beltline has to require developers to set aside 10 or 15% of their units at 60 or 80% area median income. So far, since 2018, when it first started, that policy has netted out over 800 units of affordable housing around the Beltline. That does not require, and that's by mandate, that rental properties have to set aside those units. And they get parking minimums eliminated and some other incentives to allow them to do that. Imagine what would have happened when the Beltline was first inceptionalized and back in 2010 or 2012, we would have thousands of units right now that would just automatically occur. That's the type of leadership you'll get with me. And now the West Side Park area has an inclusionary zoning policy that does the same thing. We need more innovative, constructive leadership like that.
Thank you. It's been a great discussion, and I know that there are all sorts of competing pressures on each one of you. You have a limited amount of time, and we deeply appreciate your being here with us this evening. We're going to close with concluding remarks, and we're going to go in alphabetical order, starting with Antonio Brown.
Thank you, Tom. It has been an honor and a privilege to be with you all here today. Thank you for this opportunity. Sorry you caught me eating and drinking on camera a few times, but you have been so generous with your time. I believe that Atlanta is standing on the precipice of being this great international city we talk so much about, or becoming a city we don't recognize. And I believe that we have to start moving into proactive leadership, where we're not being reactive and only treating the symptoms of the issues that this city is facing and continuing to band-aid these things. I believe we have to create a socioeconomic shift within the economic class system in this city. We have to move residents living in poverty into our working middle class. and we have to lift up our small businesses and our working middle class into becoming entrepreneurs and providing them access to capital and resources. This is the only way we can truly build an inclusive ecosystem where no Atlantan is ever left behind. This is the only way we'll be able to truly even address the crime that we see transpiring in this city. So once again, I'm asking for your support. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here, and thank you for this opportunity, Tom.
Andre Dickens.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for this opportunity to talk and this format of Zoom, keeping us safe and allowing us to be able to do this, and allowing myself, that I came from another forum in Southwest Atlanta, to be in the car to then get to my home. So thank you. I'm a Georgia Tech engineer. I love to solve problems. I'm a fixer, and I want to be a mayor that can solve some of the problems that we have right before us right away. I want to run this city well, but make sure that it runs well for everyone across the city. And I'll do that with integrity. I'll make sure that we have a city government that functions in a way that gives everyone the quality of life that they deserve. This is about balanced economic growth and balanced growth across our city. We do have a tale of two cities, a lot of prosperity, but a whole lot of multi-generational poverty that we must overcome. I will be the jobs mayor, one that will train people that have all this untapped talent, particularly in areas of town that have multi-generational poverty. These individuals have been getting training in my programs, hundreds of them. And when I'm mayor, thousands of them for free will get training in high-tech jobs so that they can lead across our city and we can overcome homelessness, crime, and other issues. I also see our parks as vital infrastructure. When you forced us to choose one, I see parks as infrastructure also across our city. And if COVID taught us anything, we need to have healthy parks. We did not talk a lot about Atlanta Public Schools, but I attended Atlanta Public Schools, and I want to be the mayor that makes sure we continue to have this great relationship with our school system, and that the only time we talked about them today was when we were almost not about to pay them their pilot fee that we owed them from the Beltline, which I fought to make sure that they got. So anyway, you're choosing a mayor now, and I want you to choose a mayor that you can trust to lead today, but also into the future because of the capacity that I have and the things that I've done. And I just want to say I'm smart enough to listen and strong enough to lead. I'm Andre Dickens, and go Braves tonight.
Sharon Gay.
Yeah, my husband texted me a minute ago. I think it was 5-2 Braves, bottom of the seventh. I think that's a little old. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Tom, it's great to see you. And thanks to the Alliance of In-Town Neighborhoods. I mean, some of you like Debbie and Kay and Jane and Robin, you've been in the trenches for years in neighborhood leadership. And we've had a lot of forums. They've been on public safety, they've been on green space, they've been on schools, they've been on all kinds of different topics. But what this one has reminded us again is we are a city of neighborhoods. And, one, that we are a city of neighborhoods. That's part of the richness and what makes Atlanta special. We have affordability challenges, but there's still a lot of places in Atlanta where you can live more affordably than you can in most other big cities. And that would be one of my goals, is to protect and preserve that uniqueness of our neighborhoods and the range of prices and types of housing, so that people can, no matter where you are in your age and stage of life and what your housing needs are, that you can find something in a neighborhood that you like. The second thing that this gathering has reminded us is the extraordinary civic leadership we have in our city. Maynard Jackson once said, the problem is not the bad guys, the problem is that the good guys have gone to sleep. And I want to be the mayor who wakes up the good guys. I think we have extraordinary neighborhood leadership, civic leadership, business leadership, faith communities, great colleges and universities, philanthropic organizations, but we've not been calling upon them. In recent years, I've almost been treated as, pushed away rather than brought in. We have big challenges. We've obviously got to make the city safe. That's the first thing. Anybody living in any neighborhood wants to feel safe. But we've also got to make the city take on our challenges of growing in a sustainable, equitable fashion. And my core element of why I wanted to run for mayor is I believe that every neighborhood needs to be healthy. We have too many neighborhoods that have been under distress, have been left behind for too long. We need to bring that great civic infrastructure, bring those good guys and girls into the room, and build an infrastructure that lets us do to scale what we've done in Centennial Place and in East Lake and some other places is to help neighborhoods build their own infrastructure, build their own leadership, build their own community quarterbacks, and identify the plan and the path they need to succeed, so that we create a city where all of our neighborhoods are on a path to being healthy, vital, inclusive neighborhoods, and all of our children have a chance to reach age 18, healthy, well-educated, and on a path to success. And that's the mayor I'd like to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Felicia Moore.
Hello, I'm Felicia Moore, and I want to be our next mayor. I want to be the mayor that I want to have, one that shows up, one that is accessible, and one that is working for you. I started as a neighborhood president, an MPU chair, an aide to a council member, active involved with the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, a council member because I wanted to be the council member I wanted to have, and council president, and now I'm running to be our next mayor. My goals are very simple. One, to make sure that every neighborhood in this city is safe, no matter what your zip code, bracket, or your income. We've got to fight this crime all across the city in order to get help in any part of the city. I have 5 C's that I want to address that, and I'm asking you to please go to FeliciaMooreForMayor.com and look at my comprehensive plan. The second thing I want to do is get us our city services. You know, those yard trimmers are still sitting on the curb. We have allowed the infrastructure of our city services over many administrations to crumble. And I want to get in and fix it because I talk to the employees and I know the issues, and those issues need to be addressed. But also the 3 things that I want to do in my platform are what I call my principles of service. Transparency. I want to advocate for transparency, but now I get an opportunity to make sure we have a transparent government where you can see how your money is being spent so that you can know what we're up to as a city. Ethics. Ethics is a big part of how I've served. I want to make sure that I continue to strengthen our ethics code as I have done as council member and even president of council throughout my career. I have served with integrity, and I will continue to serve with integrity as your mayor. And it is important because your trust is going to be very important, because we're going to have some very difficult decisions that we're going to need to make to deal with the issues that we have before us. And then finally, accountability. Being accountable to you, the people that we serve, doing what we say we're going to do. If we can't do it, coming back and tell you why and what we're going to do, owning up to issues and mistakes that we have and say, hey, we dropped the ball, but this is how we're going to fix it. Being accountable to you, who we serve, and holding people accountable for serving you. And I'm so proud as president to be the author of the legislation for the first inspector general and compliance officer of our city to hold people accountable for following our charter and our code and not violating the law. As you all know, we have this cloud of corruption that's still lingering over City Hall. Hopefully next year we'll start to see the trial start and we can start to watch it dissipate as we deal with those issues. But we need to make sure it never happens again, and I'm so proud to have authored that legislation. And I'm equally proud to be the author of the legislation for independent procurement review officers, making sure when we, the council, pass contracts for services and goods in our city, that is being done fairly, non-corruptly, and that there's processes and procedures are followed so that everybody who wants to do business with the city feel that they have a fair and open opportunity. It's being picked up by other cities in the state, and I've talked to several groups of auditors who love the legislation and are implementing it. That's what I want to bring as mayor. But again, we have many other issues, our unsheltered population that is growing, infrastructure above and below ground. Oh, the list goes on and on. But I want to be our next mayor because I love this city just as each and every one of you do, particularly those of you I see on here who have been laboring in the vineyard for quite a while as neighborhood leaders, MPU leaders, and others, wanting to make your neighborhood, your community, and this city better. And I want to do that and work every day for you to do the same. Felicia Moore for Mayor. That's my website. Please join the team. I'd love to have you as we move forward to make our city great, and greater than it's ever been. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kasim Reed.
Well, Tom, it has been terrific seeing you. I remember when I was a young legislator at the General Assembly and you were a lion in the journalism community. So to have you here with us tonight has been terrific. I also want to thank the Alliance of In-Town Neighbors and just speak plainly to you tonight. We have a competitive mayoral election right now because crime and violence has increased by 62% and 157 people are murdered. And there is absolutely no sign of this abating. This level of crime and violence has occurred candidly since May 29th. And the bottom line is people who currently hold positions act like they're powerless to do something about it. When I was fortunate enough to lead the city of Atlanta, we cut crime to 40-year lows. I didn't hire 750 police officers, which I'm going to do now. I hired 900 police officers. And when we made Atlanta the safest that it had been, we went from $400 million in construction to $5 billion in the last year that I was mayor. Our economy boomed and 71,000 people, most of whom moved into the city while I was leading it. And in addition to that, I never raised your property taxes. I was the mayor during the Great Recession. So if anybody had an excuse to come to you to raise your property tax bill, it would have been me. But I never did it. I never raised your water rates. And as a result, Atlanta boomed. Real estate values boomed. We secured the Super Bowl sighting, the college football championship, the NCAA Final Four, and our city was prosperous. So you all have a decision to make tonight. You have to ask yourselves, were you better off 4 years ago under my leadership, or are you better off right now? If you think Atlanta is in a better condition tonight than it was when I led it, you've got a lot of other folks to pick. But if you understand that in about 10 months, Buckhead would like to vote to leave Atlanta, and that because they left Atlanta, it would put an enormous financial burden on Midtown neighborhoods, an enormous financial burden. You've got to ask yourself who is most able to secure this city so that we remain one city. Last week, the men and women who keep Atlanta safe endorsed me for mayor. They trust me to lead Atlanta. The week before that, the firefighters who protect this city endorsed me. They trust me to lead Atlanta. And so I'm asking you for your vote, for your support, so that we can make sure that Atlanta remains a unique city in the world, a city on a hill, a city that's special. Thank you.
And thank you. I just want to let you know, this has been such an informative meeting, and all of us appreciate your candid answers to the question. We certainly have learned a lot. And just being here tonight, I want to say that Atlanta is very lucky to have such fine candidates for mayor. You are indeed very impressive, and we are, again, so very lucky. Thank you for coming and for sharing your ideas with us. And Tom, thank you for your excellent job in guiding us through this evening. You have been wonderful as always. I want to recognize the committee who worked with me in organizing the forum: Robin Jackson, Kay Stevenson, Debbie Skupczynski, Robin Schlinger, and Jim Hardy. And this concludes the Alliance of In-Town Neighbors Mayoral Forum for 2021. And again, thank you so very, very much. And Robin, if we could remain, if the committee could remain after our guests leave, that would be wonderful.
And now the Dodgers are ahead 6-5.
Oh, no.
That's not good.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you again. Good night.
All right.
Good night, everybody.